everybody, welcome back to my workshop, welcome back to my garage. Today's video we're going to be doing work on these necks. So what we're going to do is just go over the process of what I've done on these necks, putting the frets in, getting some side dot markers on one, doing some final shaping on the heel on one of the necks, and kind of getting them ready to install into the bodies and get those glued in. And that's what this video is going to go over. So let's get rolling. Alright, what I'm doing here is I've just got a fret slotting depth gauge. Got this from StuMac, and what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go through and check all the fret depths where I've cut the fret slots, because I cut this before I radiused the fretboard. Now that the fretboard is radiused, don't know if you can see that, but it's got a 12-inch radius on the fretboard. So now that this fretboard is radiused, I want to go back through and make sure I've got the proper depth on each of my fret slots before I go to start fretting the guitar. Don't know if you can see this or not, but it's got different profiles, different radiuses on it, and I'm going to use the 10 to 14 because I've got it at 12. And basically you can see the line, and I want it to come just to that top of that line. So as I drop it into my first fret here, don't know if you can see it, but my first fret is a little bit shallow because it only comes to the bottom of the second line on that. I want it to be to the bottom of the top line. So my first fret is a little bit shallow, so I'm going to have to recut that one. And I'm going across all the way across to check to make sure that everything is good with it and that it's at the right depth all the way across. And so far, I'm going to have to looks like I'm going to have to go a little bit deeper on each of these fret slots, just because of the amount of fretboard material I took off since I radiused the fretboard, during radiusing the fretboard between cutting it. I just put a piece of tape across the depth. That way I can, when I'm cutting, I get a visual indication of kind of where I'm at as I'm doing this fret. Alright, now that I've got all the fret slots cut down to the proper depth and verified, before I start fretting, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this triangle file and I'm going to run over each of the slots just to kind of bevel that edge just a little bit, and that'll help with putting the frets in. Doesn't need a lot, just a little bit. It'll help put the frets in, and it actually helps align them a little bit. And then it will also help whenever it needs a refret. It'll keep from pulling that material away and help keep from splintering the fretboard. So I don't know if you can see it very well, but basically I just put a small little bevel in the top of each of the fret slots. Now it's time to start radiusing the frets and cutting the frets and getting them ready to put together. Alright, so I still need to do side dots on this neck right here. I hadn't done them yet. I did them on the other one. Came out okay, but like anything else, what you want is something that's repeatable over and over again. A big shout out to Todd at Sweet Tea Guitars. He's the one that turned me on to these guys, Maximum Guitar Works. They've had this jig, and they came up with this jig, and it's really nice. They make it to order. You can see it's got a Made in the USA for William Taylor. It's got my name etched in the side of it. And basically what you do is you take your neck. This fence right here is adjustable. You line your neck up. You get it adjusted where you want it, and then you clamp your neck in to the spot so it doesn't move. And then once you have your neck put in, it comes with the template, and what it has is it has holes for 2mm, 3mm, and 3.5 or 3 1/4 millimeter side markers. And then what I do is just set this fence to where I want it, how deep in I want the fret markers to go. And I want them just to the edge of the fretboard, where the fretboard meets the neck shaft. So I've got those in there. And now what I can do is I can just drill down through each of these holes, and that way I know all my side markers are going to be exactly where I want them to be. Okay, it's time to start fretting this neck. What I've done, and I did it off camera because basically I learned a lesson, or I've always known the lesson. I had to do it off camera, but I had to radius the frets. My fret bender was not good. It was a cheap one that I bought on a budget. Turned out it just didn't work very well, so it did take me a long time. So all that footage is just a lot of frustration going through, so I left it out. But what I've got done is I've got my headstock sanded flat. I've kind of cleaned up the truss rod opening. I've polished the fretboard up to 600 grit. I did do an initial contour on the heel here as well. And what I'm going to be doing is, once this is glued into the guitar, then I'm going to blend the body and the neck in together. So that's why I left a little bit of room outside of the line that I've got drawn there. So now it's time to start cutting the frets and get ready to install frets in this. So let's get rolling. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I've got my fret tang nipper, and what I'm going to do is just that little bit in the edge of each fret of the tang that goes down to the fretboard. I'm going to snip that off. That way, when it goes in, won't protrude out at the side of the fretboard, and I'll just be able to fill that little bit of gap with some super glue and maple sawdust. You just want to be careful when you're doing this. You want to make sure that your the metal bits don't go flying away, because it's a very easy way to scratch up your guitar. So see, you can see I've just trimmed off a little bit off of each fret end, and I'm just going to go through and do all the frets, and then I'll get ready to put them in. Okay, we're ready to start fretting, and what I'm going to do is I'll run a bead of wood glue into the slot. It's not really to glue the fret into place, it's just kind of to fill the void. That way there's no dead spots in it. And then I'll start the fret by hand using a hammer, and then I'll put it into the press and press the rest of the fret in. And then of course afterwards, after I press in each fret, I'll have to clean up this glue from the spots, from the squeeze out from the glue, but that's to be expected. And then, as you can see, I've nipped off the fret ends. Don't know if you can see that or not, but I've nipped those off to where they'll go in. And so what I'll do is I'll just put the fret in here to where I know it's going to be about where I want it to be. Put it in there, and then I've already got my number 12 clamping caul set up in the vise. That way it matches the radius of the fretboard. So I've got it all fretted. The edge right now, all the edges are pretty sharp. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take this edge file and run it up and down the sides to kind of get rid of that bit of fret ends that are sticking out, and then I'll bevel them. There we go. So everything's smooth there. And then we'll do the other side. Now what I'm going to do is I'll take this tool. This will slide across and this will bevel it at a 45-degree angle. And all I'm wanting to do right now is just kind of take the rough ends off the frets. All right, those have a nice bevel to them now, right down to the base of the fret, so that's good. That's what I wanted. And now I'm just going to take a few minutes with the round over file and just dress those up a little bit to make them a little bit less sharp when I'm doing the rest of the work. All right, so here's neck number 2. I've already got the frets cut and everything. I've kind of done some work on the headstock. Straightened up the truss rod access, made sure everything's good back here, make sure the tuners are going to go through okay, and it's sanded down to 220. The heel is sort of carved on it, and it'll get more once it's installed in the body. So as you can see, we've made some pretty good progress on the necks. Neck number 1, this one's got like a 1960s Les Paul profile on it. It's a slimmer neck. Got the frets on it. Did have some issues on this one with the frets. I ended up having to pull about 7 frets. My fret bender just wasn't good, and it didn't bend some of the frets in the right way. I didn't get good radiuses on the frets. So when I seated them in, they wanted to lift up a little bit because they weren't radiused properly. So what I ended up doing is pulling those frets out and getting a new fret bender and then refretting. So this neck, pretty much final shaping is done. Thicknessing of the headstock is done. I've cleaned up the truss rod access on this. Side dots are installed. The frets are in and the edges have been dressed to where it's not sharp or anything like that. And this one is ready to start putting in the body. And then what I'll do is final fret work after it's in the body. That's when I'll do my level and crown and polish. Neck number 2. Slightly different. This one's got this one's more of a 1958, 1959 Les Paul profile for the neck, a little bit chunkier. This one is going to be the one for mine. We went through, we did get the headstock thicknessed. We've got the truss rod cover or the truss rod access cleaned up. We've got the frets in this one. We also did the side dots. Went with abalone side markers on this one. It's black side dots on the other one, but went that abalone on this one, and the frets are installed. What I've still got left to do on this one is once it dries, and then probably tomorrow, I'll dress the ends of the frets similar to what I've done on this neck. Because right now, if you pick this one up and grab it and run your hand up and down the neck, you're going to cut yourself because the fret ends are sharp where I just nipped them off after installing them. But that's the work on the 2 necks. Both necks are now ready to install in the bodies, and that's what's going to be coming up in the next videos. So thank you very much for following what I'm doing with these. Please, if you like what I'm doing, click like and subscribe. Leave a comment below if you think you'd like to see something added, or if you see a better way to do it than what I did it, because I'm not an expert. I'm just doing this as a hobby and trying to get better at it. So until next time, take care.